the deal to release about 50 hostages in exchange for about 150 Palestinian prisoners out of thousands of Palestinians who at this moment are in Israeli prisons has finally been reached. Along with this, Israel has also agreed for a humanitarian pause for a period of about 4 days. Now, United States, Qatar and Egypt have played key roles in securing this deal. So let's tell you as to what in fact took place behind the scenes. Now, it started with Qatar, a long-established mediator in the region, immediately in the aftermath of the attack and the outbreak of hostilities. Qatar approached the White House with some sensitive information regarding the hostages. Qatari officials requested a team called Cell to be established to work privately. The Biden administration addressed the request. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan put forth a seasoned diplomat with deep West Asia experience. Brett McGurk was put on the job. Another National Security Council official, Josh Gelzer, was also tasked to set up the team. The cell operated in complete secrecy. No other key U.S. agencies were aware about who was involved in the negotiations. The U.S. Middle East envoy McGurk held daily conversations with the Qatari Prime Minister that were reported back to Sullivan and even to the American President Joe Biden. On the 13th of October, Biden spoke with the families of the American hostages who are in the custody of Hamas. On the 18th of October, Biden met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv. Securing the release of hostages was the central focus of these talks, along with a humanitarian truce, according to the officials. Now, days later, on the 23rd of October, the efforts of this secret cell yielded some positive results. 2 American hostages, a mother and a daughter and her teenage daughter, were released by Hamas on humanitarian grounds. This was the very first hostage release, and it gave the Biden administration some hope that more such breakthroughs could be achieved by negotiations and dialogue. This was also the time when talks began between the CIA and the Mossad chiefs on a regular basis. The very next day, on the 24th of October, the United States also got a word that Hamas had agreed to one of the deal specifics to release women and children. However, this was the time when Israel was not willing to negotiate. It was preparing to launch a deadly ground invasion of Gaza, and for this reason, the Israelis said that they were not willing for negotiations at that time. However, they were prodded by the Americans. The Israeli officials put forth the argument that there is no proof that the hostages are even alive, and therefore they could not agree to delay their ground offensive. Now, Hamas has said that it could not determine as to who they were holding as hostages until a pause in fighting began. The United States and Israel saw this as dubious, and Israel, of course, went ahead with its ground invasion with some devastating consequences. Now, Israel has said that it is open to a pause in fighting if a hostage deal indeed comes together. After the Israeli operation began, Biden for weeks engaged in negotiations for hostages. Demands were made that Hamas must produce the list of hostages that it is holding and their identifying information and guarantees of release. Communication was difficult and messages had to be passed from Doha or Cairo into Gaza and back. As a result of these talks, an agreement was taking shape. In the first phase, women and children hostages would be freed in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. This was agreed by all sides except by Hamas on producing a list of criteria identifying the hostages. Now, on the 9th of November, the CIA chief met with his Mossad counterpart and Qatari leader in Doha. But the key obstacle remained on Hamas's refusal to identify who it was holding. Now, 3 days later, Biden called the Emir of Qatar and demanded for his crucial information. Shortly after Biden's call, Hamas produced the details of the hostages that it said would be released in the first phase of the deal. On the 14th of November, Biden in a call urged Netanyahu to take the deal, and Netanyahu agreed. However, the talks were stalled as communications went dark in Gaza. On the 18th of November, the U.S. diplomat McGurk met in Doha with the Qatari Prime Minister. The CIA chief was also dialed in after he spoke with Mossad. The meeting identified the last remaining gaps towards a deal. Now, the agreement was now structured for women and children to be freed in the first phase, but also with an aim to bring all hostages home to their families. Now, on the 19th of November in Egypt, the U.S. diplomats met with the Egyptian intelligence chief, and there he learned that Hamas's leaders had accepted pretty much all the agreements discussed a day before in Doha. In Cairo, the officials worked out the one remaining issue: the number of hostages to be released, and ultimately they agreed on the deal to release about 50 women and children who are in their custody. Our correspondent Jody Cohen has been tracking the story very closely for us and has sent us this report from Ra'anana in Israel. Listen in.
The Israeli government has voted in favour of a hostage release deal. This would see 50 living hostages released in exchange for a 4-day pause in fighting and the early release from prison of 150 Palestinian women and under 18 prisoners, including some convicted of attempted murder and involvement in terror attacks. For the first time, the Red Cross could be able to visit the remaining 190 hostages in Gaza. The Israeli opposition, US and EU have all welcomed the deal. The pause in fighting could be extended 1 day for every 10 hostages released, up to a maximum of 10 days pause in total. The fighting is then expected to continue, with Defence Minister Gallant saying that Israel's ground offensive against Hamas was key to pressuring Hamas to negotiate, and that without it, there would be no chance to secure the release of the remaining hostages. This is Jody Cohen for WION World as One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.